I'm taking you through some of my favourite games in the King's Gambit. And that's in celebration of my new DVD, there we go, PowerPlay 27, on the King's Gambit, where I present an opening repertoire for white with the King's Gambit. And that's available from chessbase.com and the online shop there, chessbase.com. And you can buy it as a physical DVD or as digital download, and it's available for Macs and PCs. Good news. So here we go. Let me present this game for you. Joe Gallagher against Sheila Jackson. This was played in the British Championship in 1988. Let's put the opening moves on the board. There we go. There's the King's Gambit. Joe Gallagher is an English Grandmaster, and he has played the King's Gambit throughout his career, and he's actually developed many really original ideas. And this game, I think, is just beautiful, really nice. So Sheila Jackson, who at that time was one of England's leading women players, plays the Fischer defence. Now, Fischer lost the game against Spassky in 1960, and after that he did some research, and a year later he published in 1961 an article called "A Bust to the King's Gambit." Basically, he recommended pawn to d6 and said this refutes the King's Gambit. Funnily enough, over the years, King's Gambit experts have actually, well, they've revised Fischer. I don't know about revising Fischer's opinion, but they consider that white actually has pretty decent chances in this, and that's borne out by results. And certainly this looks like fun for white. Okay, let's try and explain why. Well, basically, first of all, white breaks up these pawns. I mean, that's crucial if you want to try and get through to black's king. It's essential to break up these pawns so that the queen's bishop can come into play. So this forces the pawn forward. Now the knight should go back. So that looks pretty weird for a start, that this knight going back and forth. But the thing is, now you can see that this pawn has been weakened, and if white manages to take that pawn, then all those squares on the f-file will be weak. That pawn looks dreadful on g4, and white will be doing extremely well. So bishop h6, that's kind of the main line, defending the pawn on f4. So knight c3. And now black struggles to develop normally, actually. The king is a huge problem in this position because the king side isn't really very safe, but getting to the queen side is problematic. That takes a long time to clear all the pieces. c6 played by Jackson, and that prepares the queen's route path to f6 to prevent knight d5. So knight e2. If white can take here, white is, simply from a positional point of view, white is doing extremely well. So queen f6 defends that pawn. So now two pieces defending. And now g3, this absolutely crucial move to break up those pawns and gain control over the f4 square. And there was a beautiful game that Nigel Short played against Akopian, where Akopian took on g3, and, well, basically Short had excellent compensation for the pawn here. That knight performs a wonderful role blockading the pawn on g4. Jackson played, I mean, I would say the principled move here, pawn to f3, establishing that protected pass pawn on f3, and knight f4. And, well, if you saw my first video on the King's Gambit with the game by Ruslan Ponomaryov, you'll recognise this pawn chain. and how white actually has the ability to play round those pawns. And although at first glance it looks terrifying, we mustn't get to a king and pawn endgame. Well, you'll notice that all the pieces are on the board. Well, apart from one, white's king's bishop pawn, but all the other pieces are on the board. And as I said, it's actually not so easy for black to develop here. So queen e7. Perhaps prepares knight f6, puts a bit of pressure on e4, so bishop d3. And bishop g7, yeah, if this knight develops, then there are potentially tricks on that bishop here. So bishop g7 comes back, attacks the pawn on d4, bishop e3. And now h5, well, that will prevent the knight coming to h5. But and it looks very nice, this pawn chain, but well, just look at black's development. Not so great. It also means that it's going to be, well, as before, where is black's king going here? So Jackson clears the queenside quickly, and now castles queenside. Again, the king manages to escape left. Behind those pawns, very safe indeed. Knight f8. Clears the knight out of the way. Well, it's a bit grovelly on the back rank, but needs must. Got to try and clear the bishop out of the way. And rook e1, you can see that white's piece is just building beautifully here. It feels like something is going to explode, and it does. Bishop d7 now, while black's king is still in the middle. e5, well, it feels like such a natural move with all this energy behind those pawns. Now, if black were to try and keep the position closed, then this sacrifice, well, it's just so natural. The queen is in huge trouble, actually. Bishop g5, it's just a dreadful position. Perhaps knight f6 coming soon to open up the e-file. Let's go back. So e5 just played. So Jackson took this. And Gallagher took back. So to some extent the e-file is closed, but well, it's still not easy for black because this knight wants to hop in here. And the problem is that castling queenside does not actually offer great security. Let's just have a very quick look. After this, knight a4 is an incredibly strong move. And you can see these pieces stuck on the other side of the board just don't contribute to the defense. These bishops are pointing in the right direction, both of them. The knight looks good. We've got the queen coming over to a5. Actually, this is just a winning attack for white. Really no defense. So let's go back here. So white has just recaptured on e5. Black blocks with knight e6, understandable, but knight e4 threatens a big check, and if castles, once again, white's pieces flood over to the queen side, and that is already devastating. So after knight e4, bishop takes e5. Well, I mean, maybe there's no really good alternative here, but obviously with the e-file opening, that looks like a lot of fun for white. Knight takes e6, bishop takes e6, and bishop c5. Queen is attacked, moves to the side, and now knight d6 check. That's a great move. So if the king moves, then rook takes bishop, for example. So bishop takes d6, and now a killer move, rook takes e6, rook takes bishop, check. Now, if that rook is taken, then white crashes in. These bishops are just deadly. You know, they were slashing down to the queen side. Now they're cutting across to the king side. If king d7, well, actually, black will not survive the crossfire, and that's actually checkmate. So let's come back. Rook takes bishop, check, just played. The bishop came back to e7. Now, white hasn't won anything yet. In fact, black is still 2 pawns up. In particular, that pawn on f3, that protected passed pawn, is perhaps worrying, but actually white's got it under control. I mean, there are actually several good ways to proceed here. You could take on e7 and play rook e1, but bishop d6, also very strong. And here, well, I mean, there are a few alternatives, but it's already looking very, very promising for white. So Jackson thought, okay, maybe I can simplify. Let's give the queen, and if the king can escape, then things might be pretty good. Also, that bishop looks at g3 as well. But here, well, a couple of good moves. Bishop f5 is pretty good, but Gallagher played the spectacular bishop a6, and that's a beautiful looking move. And yeah, this is tough. I mean, obviously opens up the d file. Looks at bishop takes b7, so castles queenside. And now another fantastic move for white. I mean, this is beautiful stuff. Queen c3, not only hitting the rook in the corner, but threatening queen takes c6 and imminent checkmate. So that's a great move. I love the way it uses that bishop on a6 as well. Knight e7 protects this one, and now rook takes bishop. There you go. Everything just kind of hangs together. Obviously, if rook takes rook, then the rook will drop in the corner. So pawn takes bishop on a6, and here, although yeah, white has a queen against rook and knight, we've got to make sure that this is tidied up. So rook f6, in fact, white is winning this position, because you can combine threats against the king with controlling this pawn, and actually white is winning this. Rook f8 protects the pawn on f7. Queen c5 hits lots of things. So rook d7. And now Gallagher took on h5, which looks like a great move and actually worked out very well. In fact, c4 is the best move, which takes away a square from the knight, and c4 should be winning for white. Queen h5 actually is inaccurate. I mean, it looks like an obvious move. In fact, knight d5 gives black some counter chances here, but okay, you can analyze that yourself. Let's look at the game continuation. Queen takes h5, rook f d8. Now, that threatens mate, but queen takes pawn, pins that, and also takes another pawn. King b7, steps out of the pin, mate threatened again. Queen takes f3, defends the d1 square. Now that is a pretty good series of moves from the queen. The queen went to c5, to h5, takes on g4, takes on f3, and bounces back to defend against the mate on d1, the hardest working piece in professional chess, the queen. Fantastic stuff. And now, of course, white is winning very, very simply with all these extra pawns. b3 is a very tidy move, and now it's just a case of being a little bit careful and just playing the h-pawn down the board. So we've just crossed move 40. No doubt there was massive time pressure involved, and here black resigned. Well, what a spectacular game. And once again, a very good illustration of what can happen to black in these kind of situations where black has that pawn chain on f3 and g4, where white just plays around those pawns. Of course, there is some jeopardy involved, but beautiful game by Joe Gallagher. More on Fischer's defense on the DVD or digital download, available from chessbase.com. Thanks for watching.